So I know that this was an attempt to kill me, to take me out at 8 o'clock on an 8th day.
Claws were in my left side, like on my hip, and they were like ripping round my back and like dragging me. It felt like I was sinking into the ground.
This is my experience. I'm not expecting you to believe a single word that comes out of my mouth.
Ripping me to pieces, and the claws were so deep in me, I could like feel it scraping against my bones.
I know it was an attempt on my life.
I saw two grey aliens walk straight through the wall, straight through the glass, straight towards me, and they must have stopped about this close from my face.
This isn't imaginary balls of fire. This is me looking at my feet and flames, real flames coming off my feet.
Horrific. There were tubes filled with crazy kind of mixed DNA beings, half reptilian, half human, arms and legs, different colours, shapes, sizes, all over the place, with scary looking features. They weren't human, they weren't completely reptilian, they had mixed breed.
It's love or fear. What are you going to choose, baby? Before we get into this video, I just wanted to add in a little side note, so I've stuck this extra little bit of footage in. You're going to hear me talk about reptilians, and I want to make one thing very, very clear. Not all reptilians are malevolent. There are some beautiful reptilians that live amongst us, that live within this galaxy, in this universe, and some of them help us, some of them aid us, some of them assist us. If you watch this video without me putting this little bit of extra footage in, then you may think that all reptilians are bad. But I want to make one thing very clear. That is not the case. There are some beautiful ones. There are lots of different species of extraterrestrials within our galaxy and multiple other galaxies and universe. I mean, thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions. And we're just only aware of a very, very small slither of reality. And I want to make it really clear that I'm not saying all reptilians are bad. And there are loads of extraterrestrial races and species out there that want to help us. And I don't want you to think or feel that what I'm sharing is a message that all of these forces are bad, because that's not the case. There is just a parasitic consciousness at work, and that parasitic consciousness has a little bit of a hold over certain facets of reality, and it can affect us in a detrimental way. I love you with my heart, with my soul, with every fibre of my entire being. Today I'm going to share with you some information that is kind of a bit out there, and I know there's a lot of people that will watch this video and think, what the fuck is this guy talking about? Some people will find this a little bit disturbing, and there will be other people that know that what I am sharing is the truth. I'm going to try my best to put this video or share the information in this video in some kind of chronological order, although it's going to be very, very difficult, because I'm going to be talking about events that have happened in the last few weeks and going all the way back to the time that I was born and what happened with my mother while she was pregnant. Some of the information that I'm sharing today I've shared in my previous books, I've shared it in certain workshops, but there's information that I'm going to share today that I've never shared with anyone. So The reason for that being is I've only just started to piece this crazy jigsaw puzzle together over the last few weeks, since certain events happened, which has just kind of brought all of this madness to the surface. My daughter is going to speak in this video. My son tried to say what he needed to say on camera to record certain elements that have happened to him since all of this stuff kind of kicked off a couple of weeks ago, but it got a little bit too emotional for him and brought up a lot of feelings which he dealt with like a spiritual warrior at the time, but speaking about them on camera again, it brought it up and it was too much. So I'm going to speak on his behalf and share what happened within his experience over the last couple of weeks. I'm going to take you to a crash site during this video where I was in a car crash a couple of years ago on a specific date, and I know it was an attempt on my life, and it was just before I started Star Magic, the business, launched it. We're going to go to that crash site. I'm going to show you pictures that I took at the scene and explain to you, what is so crazy about that particular event and situation, and why I know there was more to it than kind of meets the eye. So this is kind of this story is kind of, I'm still kind of getting my head around it myself, and I feel that the reason I'm sharing this on camera is just as much for my own benefit as it is for yours, because I'm still trying to piece this together and uncover and unearth more of what has actually happened. And the more I'm researching and looking and journeying and going into this, the more information is coming up for me to work with and to feel and to know and to realise and to remember, which has been buried real deep somewhere in my consciousness for the last 39 years since I've been incarnated onto this planet in this human form. I was in Turkey for about 2 weeks, and I was running a workshop over there, and I was working out of a healing practice, doing lots of one-on-one healings. And one day I'm there working with a client in this room, and this being comes in behind me. I've not seen a being like this before. This was some horrible fucking being, powerful being as well. And it started pumping fire into the back of my body. It came in real quick from nowhere, and it started to pump the fire in through my back, and I saw it flow down through my shoulders, and it started to run down my arms. And then I was aware of it, I felt it, and I saw this being, and I stopped it. I put a stop to this happening, and continued to heal my client, got this being out of my space, and carried on working for the rest of the day. Now, that evening, I went to the gym, and I trained. I came out of the gym, and I've gone into the sauna. And I'm sat in the sauna, and I'm the only person in the sauna. And the saunas are wooden, it was like 3 levels up. I'm looking at this door which was kind of in front of me and to the left with the little glass window like you get in a sauna. And these 3 beings, 2 of them were reptilians, like lizard looking beings, and the other one was a being that I've not seen in my space before. The only way I can describe it, it was like a dinosaur on a human's body. It was a little bit like a Tyrannosaurus Rex's head, but it wasn't really kind of a Tyrannosaurus Rex. It was a little bit different from that. But these 3 beings, they kind of like were peering in the glass window, and they were just staring at me. And I was just sat there looking back at them. I didn't go into fear, I just held my space, I stayed in my heart, and I just stared back at them. And I'm thinking to myself, what the fuck are they staring at me for so long for? I've seen these things come into my space fleetingly and leave again. But to hang around for this long, I mean, we're talking like, maybe 10 minutes. That's a long time to have these crazy looking beings just staring at you through the glass window whilst you're in the sauna, sat there in your swimming trunks. So they stayed for as long as they stayed, and then they went. I've got out of the sauna and I've gone in to have a Turkish massage. So I'm having a massage, I've come back out and I'm laid down on this bed afterwards. And you know when you've had a massage, you're kind of like a little bit dreamy, a bit like coming out of a meditation. You're just in a real beautiful, serene space. So I'm led there and I just started getting this information. I just started getting information about when I was younger, when I was born, all of this sort of stuff. For those of you that don't know, I was fostered as a kid, and then I was adopted at quite a young age, and my birth father didn't know about me, but my birth mum, I tracked her down when I was like, I think 25, 26, something like that. And she told me about him, and that his name was Danny. When I was actually born, I was given the name Daniel, which is very similar to what these blue beings called me when I got taken up on a spacecraft back in 2009 when I was in New Zealand meditating in a pyramid in my mate's garden. This space pod came down. Some of you will know this story, some of you may have read about it in my books, but if you don't know, I got taken up in a spacecraft and went to a planet in the Alpha Centauri star system, met these beings there, had a big download of like light codes and geometry, and that was kind of what kicked off star magic. These codes, this download was very important. But when I was on this planet, they called me Deron, and Deron's very similar to Daniel, but that's just another little piece of this puzzle. As I said, I'm going to flip backwards and forwards from time to time because this isn't like a straightforward thing to explain. So as it comes through, I'm just going to explain it and share it. So I'm lying on this kind of like bed thing, this circular bed in this like sort of chill out bit outside the sauna room, the massage room. I've started getting this information, these knowings have started coming in, and I knew that my dad was called Danny, and I knew that he had blonde hair. And I started thinking to myself, I wonder if he had blonde hair and blue eyes. Because I knew on the one side of my birth mother's family, they were like an Irish bloodline, Irish Egyptian bloodline, when you trace it back. So I knew this piece of information. So I'm thinking on the other side, I wonder if he's got blonde hair and blue eyes. And so anyway, I've come out the gym, out the hotel. I've gone back to this place where I was staying, this healing centre, and I've phoned up my birth mother. And I've said, you know, Danny didn't have blonde hair and blue eyes, did he? And she said, yeah, he did. And she said, funnily enough, we've been doing some work on the family tree, and it only turns out that on the one side of the family, there's this Egyptian Irish bloodline. On the other side, you've got on one side of you've got German blood and also Jewish blood. And it was a few kind of like generations back. But I'm thinking, okay, so there's this guy that came in and had sex with you, and I was a kind of a byproduct of that. And I know that there's there's Irish Egyptian, there's Jewish, and there's German blood within inside of me. So I'm thinking, I wonder if there's something going on with my DNA. I wonder if something could be happening. Now, what also came back to me when I was lying on this kind of couch, this bed thing, after the massage, was some things that happened to me when I was a kid. Between the ages of like 3-4 years old up to about 12, 13, I used to wake up in the night time screaming, shitting myself, petrified to fuck. I'd wake up and I'd be climbing the walls in my bedroom like something was chasing me, trying to get me, or I'd be running around the house trying to get away from something. And then all I'd hear is, Jerry, 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 it's okay, it's a bad dream, it's okay, you're alright. And my mum and dad would be there, like my adoptive parents, like, you know, trying to coax me back. I'd be sweating, you know, panicking, like something was trying to get me. So I just had these knowings that at this time something was trying to mess about with my genetics or my DNA. So I start looking into this stuff a little bit more, and I start researching on the internet about, you know, human DNA and genetic bloodlines, Nazi bloodlines, all of this sort of stuff. Now, my birth father, Danny, he actually went to Australia. This is something that my mum knew, and I know that in Australia there's lots of reptilian bases underneath the ground. There's lots of Nazi activity underneath the ground, also in broad daylight, but most people are not aware of it. As other, obviously, malevolent beings in human form and walking amongst us, but also underneath the ground too. So I knew that he'd gone to Australia. Now, what kept ringing in my ear was the fact that he's come into my mum's life. He's had sex with a lady that has specific blood in her genetics, and I was a byproduct. And, you know, I've got really good remote viewing abilities, really good telepathic abilities, good healing abilities. All of these kind of things, these extrasensory abilities, seem very, very natural to me. And there's other things that happened on my journey too, which I'll come on to shortly and share that with you. So I've had this experience, I've had these knowings whilst I'm lying on this bed. I've spoke to my mum afterwards, she's confirmed all these bloodlines. Now the next day, I am having dinner with a lady in a restaurant, and we're talking away, and then this same being that came into my healing space came in through the wall of the restaurant and tried to stab me in my right kidney, but I saw it and stopped it again. And you know, this all happened in fourth density, but that's a world that I play in regularly, so I'm used to this kind of stuff. You know, I've been remote viewing reptilian bases, I've been bilocating to different spaces, not just on this planet, but other planets in different densities for a number of years. This stuff is all very natural, so this being's come into the room. I've had a little bit of an esoteric battle with it, and I've defended myself. Now, I've gone home after this meal, I've gone to sleep. The next day is the only day that I had off whilst I was in Turkey, and the interpreter that was working with me, she took me around Istanbul. Now, we went to lots of Ottoman palaces and different places, and we're walking around this Ottoman palace, and I had this really heavy feeling in my chest, and I just thought to myself, you know, this is because of some of the history that I'm picking up on. And that was really, you know, just me being very amateur, really. I shouldn't have let that one bypass me, but I did. That's what happens when you think and you don't feel and you don't tune in properly. Anyway, my daughter has called me 20 to 30 minutes later and told me about an experience that just happened when she's got off her horse, been dragged to the floor, that had tried to eat the inside of her back and her womb and pull her to the floor.
I went to open a gate. It's a really difficult gate, so you have to... I was holding my horse and I had to reach over the gate and lift up the latch, and you have to kind of like shove it with your hip. And I didn't get that far. I reached over the gate and I kind of like blacked out, and I dropped the reins and I just kind of like slumped on the ground, and I was probably out for like 30 seconds, not even that, because my horse was still stood there, and I was like half slumped against the gate, like on my side, and it felt like there was something like trying to drag me back to the ground to the right, where I slumped with my back up against the gate. So I was being dragged to the right, and I like tried to turn to my left to grab onto the gate to lift myself up, and I just like, it was impossible. Like I couldn't. It was like lifting dead weights. It was like I was being dragged down to the bottom of the sea with like big balls of steel around my ankles, and I just couldn't get up. And so I was like lying on my back on the ground, and I tried to turn away, but it was like claws were in my left side, like on my hip, and they were like ripping round my back and like dragging me. It felt like I was sinking into the ground, and I swear I was like dying. Like it felt like it was literally ripping me to pieces, and the claws were so deep in me I could like feel it scraping against my bones, and I was still trying to like roll away from it, but it was like dragging me back and back and back and back, and I was like still against the gate, but I was on my back now, and I just had to shine loads and loads of light on it to try and just like get it to just leave me alone. It was scary as hell, and I didn't know what to do. I was kind of like panicking a little bit, and the claws were still there. It was still trying to like rip into me. It had a really, really tight grip, and it was difficult getting back on. There was nothing to get on from, so I had my leg hoisted right up to the stirrup, like my knee almost to my chin, and it was like the most painful thing I've ever felt. Like they were still ripping me, and all the way back to the yard I was in so much pain. I phoned my dad as soon as I got back to the yard, because the claws were still really, really deep into my back, and he was in Turkey at the time, and he tuned in and removed these things, whatever they were, from my back, and the pain was still there a little bit, but by the end of that night it was almost completely gone. I've been protecting myself with geometry since this has happened, because I've had a few reptilians try and come into my space, and I've stopped them. I imagine a ball of pure white light coming from my heart, and I just shine it out brightly, really, really powerful, just into my space, and then just getting rid of anything and everything that's not the nicest. And then I imagine an upside down purple pyramid around me, and I fill it with purple light, and then imagine it spinning really, 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 really fast, clockwise, and that just like deflects anything that comes into my space that I don't want near me. It must have been a few years ago now, about 3 years ago. We were in a reptilian base in Mexico, and we were in a reptilian's office, what looked like a reptilian's office, and I was stood with my dad against the far wall of this office, and all the walls were glass, and I saw 2 grey aliens walk straight through the wall, straight through the glass, straight towards me, and they must have stopped about this close from my face. My dad took me out for meditation, took me out of the bunker. We went through loads of crystal portals, like rose quartz and smoky quartz, and through all these different places, and shed all the old energy so that they couldn't trace us back to where we were meditating, our space. What I saw when I went into the reptilian base is horrific. There were tubes filled with crazy kind of mixed DNA beings, half reptilian, half human, arms and legs, different colours, shapes, sizes, all over the place, with scary looking features. They weren't human, they weren't completely reptilian. They had mixed breeds, mixed race, doing all kinds of crazy tests on them to try and breed with humans.
So this event happened to my daughter, and I know that it happened as she was riding her horses, because when she's on her horses she's completely sunk into the moment. They know that, so they've come in at a more of a vulnerable moment and taken her down, because she's been remote viewing, bases and spaces and other locations around this planet with me for a while. She's only 14, but since she's been 8 or 9 years old, we've been travelling and doing lots of work together. A couple of days later, I get back from Turkey, and my son is in his bed. He's asleep. It's the middle of the night, and all I know is him coming into my room and just saying, "Dad, I've been attacked." What had happened up until that point is a being had come into his space. He didn't know what kind of being it was at the time. All he knew was that a really black, heavy energy was straight through his heart centre. It was pinning him to the bed, and it was messing about with his consciousness. He's woke up whilst it's happening. He's had a battle with it in his sleep. He couldn't speak out because he had to use all his mental strength to get this being out of him. He's got this being out of him, he's got himself into a protective state, and then he's come into my bedroom and said, "Dad, such and such as this just happened. Can you help me clean up the rest of the space?" So I've woke up, obviously cleaned up the rest of the space for him, and that was that evening. Now the next day, he's over at his pal's house over the road. He's sat there at the kitchen table, and he thinks that his mate has come in and stood next to him. He turns round to look at his mate, and there is a reptilian being with green scales and red lining between each of the scales, which is something that I've not actually experienced in the physical myself before, which I have seen them. I've remote viewed beings with the red between the scales, but I've not seen them in the physical. But this appeared in the physical, and it was just stood there in the kitchen next to him, and my son is just looking up at this being. Anyway, the feelings that came through his body were the same feelings that happened the previous night when he had the attack in the bed. So he's got up, he's walked past this being, he's left the house, he's come home, and he said, Dad, such and such has just happened over the road. So I said, cool, okay, let's just tune in, let's deal with it. So we've tuned in, we've checked in with the being, realised that this is all to do with this information. There's what happened when I was in Turkey, realising this information, it's triggered something pretty heavy duty within myself that these beings really did not want me to find out about. So anyway, that's happened, and then again 2 or 3 nights later, my son's meditating in his bedroom. He's come out of his body, he's jumped inside a golden sphere, and he's travelling through a field with some fairies. And he's travelling through this field, just chilling, just having a great time, just relaxing, observing, meditating, journeying. And then these 3 beings, one of them was the same one that came into his mate's house that attacked him in the bedroom. And he said the other 2 were different. One of them was smaller with a bald head and horns, and the other one was kind of like a lizardy, snaky looking being. But the 3 of them were trying to get inside this sphere, but he stayed in his heart. He just kept nice, cool as a cucumber, and they didn't have the power to come inside of his sphere. So they went in the end, they left, he continued his journey, come back inside of his body, and that was it. And since that, they've not attacked my son, they've not attacked my daughter, and nothing's been in my space in the last 2 or 3 days. But over the last couple of weeks since I've got back from Turkey, there has been a heavy duty onslaught in my direction. And I've had to work pretty hard, man, to keep my space clear and stop this stuff kind of, dragging my vibration and changing my thought patterns and my frequency. But this is just what's been going on. So anyway, I phone my birth mother again, and I say, listen, I really need to speak to you. I've discovered some more stuff. Now, I've been researching at the time, and I've been looking on the internet, and I've been looking into DNA and all this sort of stuff. And I found this thing on the internet called Project Oak Tree. And Project Oak Tree was a military / Illuminati, which is the same kind of, it's under the same umbrella, project operation back in the 1950s. What happened? This is all stuff you can research yourselves on the internet. So, Project Oak Tree, there were certain women that were born in the 1950s, and these women, they had children, boys that were born between 1973 and 1978, and women that were born in the 80s. Now, I was born in 1978, and my mother was born in the 50s. So I found out whilst I was doing this research that certain souls were brought through into women in the 1950s that had sons in the 1970s, between 73 and 78, that were specific souls that had come down onto this planet to raise the vibration. They were really old souls, and they were here to do specific things and really heighten the vibration and expand consciousness on this planet. So I'm thinking to myself, surely I'm not one of those souls. Surely I can't be one of those souls. So what I found out during this research is that the women that were born in the 50s, they had to be born on specific dates because they had to have 11s. They had to be 11s numerologically. okay, because 11 is a stargate. And when a woman is a number 11, their womb is a stargate. And what it means is through the technology that is out there, they can bring certain souls into certain bodies, etc., etc. So I'm thinking to myself, surely that my mum is not a number 11. So anyway, I phoned her up and I've said, what's your date of birth? She tells me her date of birth, and lo and behold, it's a number 11. So I'm thinking, fuck, man, I wonder if I really am like one of these souls, and maybe I've got some kind of specific DNA, and that's why these beings were kind of taking me out of my sleep when I was a kid and transporting me to other locations and doing crazy things with me, like by taking certain DNA strands and using them to do whatever they were doing. So anyway, I found out this piece of information. Then I've started asking her about my birth, because I found out that during this with this Project Oak Tree information, what happened is the Illuminati, whatever you want to call them, I don't even like that word Illuminati, I think it's bullshit, you know, we should just call them a bunch of cunts or whatever, but, you know, that would be labelling and judging again. So these other low vibrational beings that manipulate and control this 3D matrix that we play this game of life in, or some of us don't even know we're playing it, we're just existing and being pushed from pillar to post and manipulated by fourth density beings in other spaces. So anyway, I was born on that specific date. I've spoke to my mum and I've said, I need to know more information about my birth. I need more information about my birth. So I've got to come around my house. So she drove round to my house. She lives like, you know, up the motorway. But she came down last week. We sat down having a cup of tea and I'm asking her about my birth. And it turns out that I was born at 3:50 in the afternoon, which is an 8. I was born on the 8th of March. So I've got an 8 and a 3, which is 11. And also 1978. Add them all together, it comes up with 9. So there's 8. There's all these specific numbers in my date of birth, which is very, very important. So we're talking about my birth. Now, with this Project Oak Tree, what happened is once these beings tracked these certain souls, they infiltrated the space and they tried to cause as much trauma as possible to the mother and to the child, and tried to cause as much trauma as possible whilst the child with the soul was in the womb of the mother, because by causing trauma you cause fragmentation, and it's easy to create multiple personalities and to infiltrate the consciousness of that human being once they've incarnated. So I'm asking my mum about the birth and all that sort of stuff. Now when my mum got pregnant with me, obviously Danny, the birth father, he doesn't know about me, and there's loads of other things around this event which aren't really that important, but kind of are. But I'm going to leave them for today. But he's not around. My birth mum didn't tell her parents that she was pregnant. She's just gone off to another town and gone into a home for women that didn't have like husbands or boyfriends or whatever it was at that time, because it was frowned upon to be pregnant out of wedlock. So my mum's gone down to this home. She's checked herself in. She's gone in there when she's a couple of months pregnant, stayed there till, you know, it was time for me to pop out. And she's gone into labour at about like 1 o'clock in the morning. Now, she's been taken to hospital. She's been stuck in a room. Put in a room. Nobody came to see her. She's gone in at just after like 1 o'clock in the morning when she arrives in hospital. I'm not born till 3:50 in the afternoon. At exactly 1 hour before I was born, 2 men and a woman walk into the room. They don't say anything to her. You know, if you've been sat there in labour contracting for 13 hours and 50 minutes, you'd think someone would say, "You alright, love? Are you okay? You know, how are you feeling? Can we get you some pain relief?" No one said anything. 2 men in masks, which my mum describes as like robots. So they're just kind of mulling around in the space. 15 minutes later, at exactly 3:05 in the afternoon, again which is an 8, a Stargate, one of the doctors gets a big pair of scissors and he gives my mum an episiotomy, which is where they cut the piece of skin between the vagina and the anus. Just cut it with a pair of fucking scissors. You know? No pain relief. Didn't even tell her that he was going to do it. He's just walked up, got the scissors, boom, chop. It makes me wince when I think about it right now. You know, when my mum was describing it to me, I was like, fuck, man. But this is what happened. So they've gone in at 3:05, given her an episiotomy, which has obviously must have been very painful for her and caused trauma to me on the inside of the womb at the same time. So, anyway, that's happened. Now, they've not said a single word. Not one fucking word. Are you okay? You know, like, so they just cut her with a big pair of scissors. She's bleeding like fuck. Now, she's had to sit there for another 35 minutes, lying on this bed, whatever it is, with her legs apart, bleeding where they've cut her open. And then I'm born 35 minutes later. 35, 5 and 3 is an 8. Another Stargate. Then I come out at 3:50, which is 3:50 and 8 on the 8th of March, 8, Stargate. All these 8s just keep coming through, all over the place. So, this is what happened. As soon as I was born, I was taken off into another room. There was no bonding process. They didn't let my mum hold me. They took me off and stuck me in another room. And they left my mum to bleed for about 10 minutes. And then they came and stitched her up. Now, apparently, it's more painful the stitching up of an episiotomy than the actual cut with the scissors. Obviously, I don't know. I'm just going by what I've been told by speaking to different women about this, and obviously taking what my birth mum's told me. So, this has happened. Now, I've obviously been taken off. I've been fostered. I've gone through a few foster homes. I've got some memories of me being passed from 2 people to a lady and lying on this kind of lady's arms, like I'm down here looking across this like lawn on a driveway where there's a really old car. I can remember being handed over. I've got this vivid memory. So I went through a few foster homes and was adopted. I was adopted into a family where my mum and dad loved me, but my mum used to beat me. You know, she used to pull my pants down, bend me over the bed and smack me with a wooden ruler. I also remember my first school teacher, who's a woman, she pulled my pants right down and my trousers in the middle of the classroom and smacked my ass 3 times in the middle of everybody. I was crying my eyes out. So more trauma. More trauma from my mum, more trauma from my school teachers. I also feel that whilst I was in the foster home, there was some kind of interference. You know, possibly sexually. I don't know. I can't prove this, but this is what I feel from certain knowings that have come through since I've started discovering all of this sort of stuff. Then there was all the traumatic stuff that used to happen in the night time with these beings coming into my space and me being scared and climbing the walls and all this shit. So I've just started discovering all of this information. Now, go forward in my life, quite a few years before Star Magic started. I mentioned that I got taken up on this spaceship. Now, before I got taken up on this spaceship, about 2 weeks prior to this, I was meditating in my friend's garden. I met this amazing gentleman in New Zealand by the name of Michael. Michael, if you're watching this video, I love you, brother, with every single fibre of my being. You know who you are. You're amazing, and you helped transform my world, and you guided me in so many ways that you may not even be aware of, but I just want to thank you from my heart to yours if you're watching this video. I met this amazing man called Michael. He had a pyramid in his garden, and I used to go and meditate in there, you know, in the afternoons. You know, I didn't have to go and knock on his door. I just used to go around the back, jump in the pyramid and meditate. One day I'm meditating, and I'm meditating with my eyes open, and my feet turn to balls of fire. This isn't imaginary balls of fire. This is me looking at my feet and flames, real flames coming off my feet. And then Jesus appears before me and he says to me, Jerry, you can walk wherever you want to walk. Don't be frightened. And then a set of stairs appear off to his right hand side, over to my left. and he walks up these stairs, and there's a door at the top of the stairs, and he walks through the stairs. I follow him up the stairs and through the door, and we're in the Last Supper, and I'm Matthew in the Last Supper. I'm sat there, Jesus has given his Last Supper sermon, there's all the people around, there's food, all of this sort of stuff, and I'm just sat there thinking, fuck man, I'm Matthew in the Last Supper. I've looked out the window, and there was a massive extraterrestrial spacecraft. So this happened. I was in this space for a little while. Then I've got up. I've walked out of the space, back through the door, back down and into my into my meditation, and just sat back down in the chair. The doors vanished. The steps have vanished. My feet have come back to normal, and I'm back in this meditation. Now, 2 weeks later, I'm sat in this meditation again, and my eyes are open, and a little spacecraft comes and lands next to the pyramid. And there's a being inside of this spacecraft. So I get up out of my chair, I go and jump inside this this space pod. That's the only way I can describe it. You could only fit 2 people in it. There was no back seats or anything like that. It was like a little cockpit. And there was like a roof that kind of disappeared and came back again. And the being in this craft was interfacing mentally with this craft with some kind of biological technology, and we've just travelled through this tunnel of light for about 3 or 4 seconds, maybe 5, and then we came out the other side and we're above a beach. There's water, there's sand, there's loads of beings on this beach. I've got out of this space pod, walked up the beach, and these beings were like a blue colour. Now, it wasn't a real blue, it was like a blue almost grey, but it was more blue than grey. They had no hair, they were androgynous, they weren't male or female, they were athletic looking, maybe 6.5, 7 feet, a little bit taller, maybe 7.5 feet. They were taller than I was, and I felt so emotional. It was like going home, and these beings like welcomed me. Then they made a pathway in the sea of beings, and I walked through, followed this being through these kind of like sort of like a bit of a woody area, trees, and we went through this into this space where there was like a big light structure, and I walked into this light structure with this being, and there was this other being which I can only describe as maybe their chief or their leader, and I was introduced to this being. I kind of knelt down on the floor. I just did that, I don't know why. I knelt down on the floor, and then this orange light started pouring in through my crown chakra, and it had geometry, code, hieroglyphs, but not the sort of stuff you see in our textbooks. If you've ever read my book, Star Magic Killed the Universe, there's pictures that resemble something similar, but not exactly the same, because this stuff is very strange, and it's biological. It transforms all the time. It's not the same shape always. It's always morphing and changing, but it's like a language. It's like code. So all of this stuff's pouring into my crown chakra. I don't know how long it lasts for, but then suddenly it stops. And these beings pick me up, frog march me back to the space pod. We go back through the tunnel of light, boom, I'm back in my meditation in the garden thinking, what the fuck is going on? So that happened. When I was on this planet, they called me Diron, very similar to my birth name, Daniel. I had this big download of geometry and light, and nothing else happened in my life really. We'd opened a health and fitness centre, a gym in New Zealand, and I was training people every day. You know, the business was going well. And then one day I woke up and thought I need to go back to England. So we've jumped on a plane, we've come back to England, and then, you know, the events that led to Star Magic starting, they all kicked off. I was out running one day, and I saw these fairies around a tree, and I've stopped. There's these fairies, and then an angel comes down and says, my name's Archangel Gabriel, you need to write a book called Into the Light. So I'm stood there, it's Sunday morning, middle of the street, there's this angel, thinking, what is going on, man? So anyway, this happened. I've legged it home, I've opened my computer, and I've started writing this book. This book called Into the Light came out, which I self-published a few years ago. And in that book, Into the Light, I actually talk about some of my experiences in past lives, because I did a lot of past life regression when I started this spiritual journey, and I talk about myself being a German soldier in my last incarnation in the 40s in the Second World War. Also as a kid I used to get drunk and always put a German accent on. Why was that? And one of my friends pointed out to me, he said, Jerry, you always buy German cars. What is that? Have you ever noticed? And I was like, fuck man, I always buy German cars. And I'd never realised until he kind of pointed it out to me. But this is years ago. You know, before I discovered any of this kind of like DNA stuff with my mum and in the sauna and the massage, which I explained to you a little while back. This stuff was years ago, you know, like 8, 9, 10 years ago. I went on all of these kind of journeys into these parallel realities, past lives, whatever you want to call it. I went into hundreds of my past lives. I had an amazing teacher that took me into them, and I learned a lot and discovered a lot about reality, what is reality and what is not reality. But I just wanted to mention that part about the German, the cars, the past life as a German soldier, and also the fact that I used to put on these German accents when I used to get pissed when I was younger. Just other little inclinations about all this German DNA stuff. After writing the book, I started seeing all of this geometry floating through the air, and it was the same geometry that I saw when I was on this this planet with this orange download of lights. And I was saying to my guides, what do I need to do with this information, with this stuff? They said, meditate more, Jerry. So my son and I were getting up at 5 o'clock every morning, and we were meditating for 2 hours, and we were going on these journeys to the pyramids, underneath the pyramids in Egypt. And we were in fourth density, we were sat in classrooms, we weren't the only people there. There were other people sat in these classrooms at desks, and this guy was getting these ancient scrolls out. And I've shared this information in my books too, and at some workshops, so you may have heard this information, but this guy was getting these ancient scrolls out, and on these scrolls were symbols, and it was the same symbols as the code and geometry I was seeing floating through the air, the same symbols and geometry that were in the orange download. And it was shortly after this that people started coming into my life that needed healing, and you know, I started working and using these geometrical codes to heal people, and it was working, and that's kind of when I started the Star Magic business up. Now, 2 other really important events. When I moved back from New Zealand, I didn't know I was going to start Star Magic. You know, I'd had 2 things happen in my life where I'd healed people. One was my ex-wife's migraine, and the other was a friend of mine that was in a serious car accident where her whole bad body had been smashed to pieces. And I did some healing, and she walked out of hospital with the use of a Zimmer frame in 12 weeks when the doctor had told her she may never walk again. And I thought to myself, did I help, didn't I help? You know, I didn't know. I thought it was my imagination. But when she came out of hospital, she phoned me up and she said, Jerry, I woke up one night, looked at the side of my bed and said, what are you doing here? I was in New Zealand, she was in England, but she saw me in her hospital room, exactly where I'd imagined myself. So I knew something was going on then. And this was kind of a little bit before the going up in the spaceship and the Jesus and the Matthew incident. So again, I'm jumping backwards and forwards, but it's just coming through in this way. So I hope you can kind of piece this together in your own minds. So this happens. Fuck, I've lost my train of thought again there. Such a crazy story. So yeah, we'd gone on these escapades in the pyramids. Started to start the Star Magic business. But yeah, so before this, when I came back from New Zealand with my ex-wife and 2 kids, I had an incident. Now, many of you will know this, some of you won't know this. I used to be a criminal. I used to smuggle drugs for a living. I used to smuggle guns for a living. I used to smuggle human beings for a living. And this was what I did for a number of years. It was a part of my journey. I don't regret any of it. It was just part of my experience and my journey. And there's lots of reasons I feel that I had to go through this. Number 1, to inspire other people. Number 2, I feel that I was being kind of protected in some way, shape or form whilst I was on this part of my path, because I wasn't ready to come out with the kind of abilities that I'm using now. And I feel that if I had have come out back then, I wouldn't have known how to handle them. I may have got taken out early. Lots of other reasons too, but they're kind of 2 of the main ones. So I've had these experiences and I've been on this journey. Now, when I came back from New Zealand, I went to the passport office and I got arrested for conspiracy to defraud the Bank of Scotland. Now, Whether I committed this particular crime or not, I'll leave that to your intuition and your imagination. That's down to you. But I got arrested for conspiracy to defraud the Bank of Scotland and also holding a false passport. So I get arrested, I'm taken to the police station, all this sort of stuff, and I'm bailed. Now, I come out of bail and I go and see a friend of mine, and I explain to him the story. Now, I've got some interesting characters in my life from my old world that are very good at collating certain pieces of information. Now, this money that I was supposed to have stolen was to do with bank fraud, mortgage fraud, and my friend managed to get me a document from 2007 from a law firm. I won't tell you how he got it, but he managed to acquire this document, which was about this thick, which had the properties, the mortgages of 63,000 properties from the Royal Bank of Scotland, which totaled something like £2.7 billion. And it proved that the loans on all of these mortgages were completely fraudulent. Now, these are the kind of documents that the so-called powers that be do not want us mere human beings, us scraggly little humans, to know about, because every single mortgage is completely falsified, and we should never be paying back mortgages. Number one, because they never loan us any money in the first place. And number two, what happens is we actually use our own name to create the loan and raise the finance to lend back to ourselves. But that's going down a rabbit hole and another whole story. But the fact of the matter is, my friend got me this document. Now, he emailed me this document. Now, literally the next day, I've woke up and it's disappeared from my computer. So I'm thinking, that's a bit odd. It's just disappeared from my computer. Now, I go to the gym that morning, and I come out of the gym, I'm driving home, and an unmarked police car, a Jeep, flashes its lights and pulls up behind me, and armed police drag me from my car. Why did they drag me from my car? Oh, because I had a bold back rear tyre. Are you kidding me? A bold back rear tyre. Number one, how the fuck did they know that I had a bold back rear tyre? You know, it's just bullshit. They came in behind me, they dragged me out of the car, and they were just trying to instill fear into me, because I had this document that I was going to use. I was going to represent myself in court and use this information to blow it out the water about this mortgage fraud, because I had all the evidence. So anyway, they had me at gunpoint, all of this sort of stuff, kept me for a few minutes, you know, ragged me about a little bit, and then just said, off your bike, on your way, you know, get your tyre sorted out, wrote me out a little ticket, all this bullshit, and that was that. So during this time, they went to my adoptive mum and dad's house, and they put pressure on them, and they bullied them, and all this sort of stuff. So they were just interfering in my life. Now, I was on bail for 2 years, going to and from London, and they kept feeding me with all sorts of shit. And my friend had given me another copy of this document. I had it in a file, and I've still got it on a file, tucked away somewhere, which no one will ever find in case I needed to use it. But they knew that I had this file. Even though they took it out of my computer, they knew that I had this file. So they were just trying to put pressure on me, but I didn't back down for 2 years. You know, I decided I wasn't going to have a lawyer. I was going to represent myself in court. I was going to use this document and blow them out of the water. So in the end, they dropped the charges on the mortgage fraud. But they were still going to press charges against the falsified passport, because I did have a passport in another name. And, you know, I was looking at a few years in prison. So this is all just before my star magic journey is going to start. And at the time, I didn't know my star magic journey was going to start. I was still being railroaded towards it. So I've gone into court in London. I've stood in the dock inside the glass. I'd got a lawyer for this, because I felt that because this was actually into the legal terms now and not the law of the land and the being a human being terms again, which is another story, I was going to use and have my solicitor with me to represent me. So My solicitor came in, the prosecution come up with all sorts of shit. They dragged shit up from when I was 12, 13 years old, all the way through to a few years ago, and made me look like a complete and utter, like, horrible person, and all this sort of stuff they dragged up. So they did that, and then my lawyer gave my side of the story, then I spoke. Now, before this happened, when the judge, which was a man, and two ladies came through into the courtroom, the judge on the right hand side of the three people, the one that was nearest to me, she had wings. I know this sounds a bit crazy, but she just looked me straight in the eyes and she smiled, and I knew at that point that I was going to be okay. So anyway, I've given my side of the story, prosecution, my solicitor has spoken, the judges have gone out, they've come back in 20-30 minutes later, and they've said, you're free to go, Mr. Sergeant. You have to pay an £80 court fee, you've got 1 year's conditional discharge, as long as you behave yourself in the next year, you're good to go. And the police officer was seething, they've let me out the dock, I've walked outside, she's got right up in my face and she said, you are one lucky man, Mr. Sergeant, you were supposed to go down today. And I just smiled. At that point, I knew something was supposed to happen. I didn't know what it was, but I knew something was brewing. And anyway, then obviously this star magic journey is starting to come to the forefront. There's this healing, there's these codes, there's all of this stuff's happening. Now on the 26th of December 2015, again, 26th of December 2015, I had a car accident. Now, my car accident kept coming back into my head. I didn't realise that the car accident was on an 8 day. Again, an 8. Same as the episotomy, same as my birth time, same as my birthday, same all these blooming 8s just coming through. Now, I had this car accident at 8 p.m. on the 26th of December 2015. 8 p.m. on the 8th. Now, this is the strange thing. I know this was an attempt to kill me just before I started my Star Magic journey, because I launched the Star Magic website literally 8 weeks after this car crash. Now, I've got home on Boxing Day and I'm sat outside my house in my car, and this thought comes into my head, why don't you go and see your nan who lived down the road? So I've thought, what a great idea, I'll go and see my nan. And I now realise that this thought was placed inside of my head to get me to go on this journey. So I've started my car back up again, I've drove to see my nan. She was asleep when I went to see her, so I've left straight away. I'm driving home, I'm driving along, and I remember something makes me look at the clock, and I look down, it's 8 o'clock, bang on 8 o'clock, and I think to myself, I remember thinking, oh, I can't wait to get home and see Laura and the kids. And then bang, a taxi comes into the side of my car on a crossroads and smashes into the side of my car. I go into a lamppost, my head hits the window, cracks the window, and then my car spins, goes up the road like 20 metres, and I wake up. So I must have got knocked out when I hit the windscreen when I went into the lamppost, because I can remember the car coming into the side of me and hearing this crunching metal sound. Then the next thing I'm waking up. The only reason I know I went into a lamppost is because the motorist who was 100 metres behind me, he told me once I'd escaped this kind of like lucky situation. So I've woke up, I'm spinning up the road, and everything is in slow-mo. I'm like, I could just make a cup of tea, cook some food, eat the food, drink the cup of tea, step really gently out of the car, and just sort of like, you know, fuck off. What was going on in my mind before that was, okay, I've been smashed in the side of my car, I've hit a lamppost, so the front and the side of the car's smashed, and I'm headed towards a wall. If I'd have gone into the wall, hit the wall, and got trapped, I couldn't have opened that door, the front of the car was all smashed up, and if I'd have got trapped and the car blown up, I'd have died. So all of this is going on in my head. Whilst it may have only been a couple of seconds to get from the lamppost to the wall, if that. But all of this time was just, this was all going on in my head. The time completely changed. I got out of the car, stepped out of the way, and the car slid over towards the wall. So I've got out of the car. The taxi had gone into sort of next to the lamppost, or hit the lamppost and gone just to the right of it. When I went over to speak to the taxi driver, I was kind of like, on one hand elated to be alive, on the other hand like, what the fuck are you doing, you mad cunt? You've just fucking gone into the side of me. So I'm swearing at him, you fucking idiot, blah 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 blah. You know, my adrenaline's pumping, I'm happy to be alive at the same time, I'm all these mad crazy emotions. I remember looking at this guy, and he wasn't there. He did not know what was going on. I know that something had taken over this guy, because the road that he was driving down was a small road with cars on either side. You don't go more than 20 to 30 miles an hour up this road, and he must have been going seriously fast to crash into the side of me to make the car go so far up the road. Now, what I also know from going down to the crash sites is that when my car is at the point where he would have had to have hit me on the crossroads, there's no way my car could have gone into the lamppost at that angle and span up the road, and his car ended up in the side of the lamppost, which you'll see in the pictures that I'm going to share with you. You'll see that his car came in from a different angle. I know that he was taken over by some other force, and reality was manipulated to allow him to come in through the wall. He came in through the wall at maybe 10 to 15 to 20 metres back up the road to hit me at the right angle to get me to go into the lamppost. So this is me, I'm right here, right at the very, very point on the road where the taxi would have come from my left hand side over there now from that road, and it would have come straight into the side of my car, and I went into that lamppost over there to your right hand side. Now remember, I was going at 30 miles an hour. 30 miles an hour, this is the speed that I was travelling at when the taxi came out from the side and it actually hit me. Travelling at that speed. Now the taxi that came out from the left hand side, from my left hand side over here, would have had to have hit me at this exact point, because on this left hand side there was cars on both sides of the road. How did my car go into the right hand side of the lamppost and the taxi that came from the left hand side end up in the fence exactly where it is in the photograph that you can see from the accident? It's impossible. How could that happen? That taxi was travelling at God knows how fast on Boxing Day, when there was no other cars around. Both sides of the road were completely chock-a-block with traffic. It was just completely and utterly insane. I mean, that car, to have hit my car and for me to go into the lamppost, rebound off the lamppost and go all the way up to where the car ended up, is just, it's impossible. What I feel happened is that the taxi driver was manipulated, and his consciousness was taken over, the reality was shifted, and the car actually came out of the wall further back up the road. You can see in this photo, I've circled and put numbers in 3 places. So number 1 is in line with where the taxi would have come out from that road, which is behind that sort of bright light, behind the fire engine that's there to cut the taxi driver out from his taxi. They had to cut the roof off. Point number 2 is where the taxi went into the fence. I mean, look at the angle that the taxi has gone into the fence at. It's not gone into the fence at a diagonal angle, it's gone straight into the fence. How is that possible? It doesn't make any sense to me. Now, if you look at my car, or what was my car, you can see that the front is smashed in where it hit the taxi. Also, the side of the car, where the taxi went into the side of the car, is smashed where it came out from the other road and hit me going straight. What happened is my car hit that lamppost and it span 2 or 3 times, and I woke up halfway from between where the lamppost is and to the wall. And when I woke up, the car was in complete slow-mo. Everything was so slow. It's like I could have made a meal, had a cup of tea, took my time, read a few pages of a new book, and then got out of the car before it hit the wall. I mean, all of this stuff was going through my head. I mean, I saw the wall come in, I knew the front of the car was smashed, I knew the driver's side was smashed, and I saw the wall come in. And I thought to myself, if I hit the wall and I get trapped, then, you know, I'm not going to be able to get out of the car if it blows up. You know, all of this stuff was going through my mind. This is how much time I had. It was crazy. But anyway, the wall was coming. I got out of the car, moved out of the way, and then the car went into the wall. And that's where it ended up. If you look at this picture, you can see number 4 is where the taxi went into the side of my car. Lucky I didn't have a passenger, otherwise, you know, they'd have been smashed. Number 5 is where my head smashed the windscreen. I mean, you can't really see it properly from this angle, but the windscreen on that right hand side where my head hit it was shattered. And it's important to mention that all of this happened at 8 p.m. on the 26th of December 2015. 8 p.m. on an 8 day. You know, is this coincidence? And here's the funny thing. I actually arrived at my home, which is about a mile up the road, and a thought came into my head, and that thought was go and see your nan. Now, my nan at the time was 97 and in a nursing home, so instead of getting out of my car and going inside to see my family, I just turned around off the drive and drove back down this road that the accident was on and to the nursing home where my nan was. But she was asleep. So I turned around and came straight back home, and that's when this accident happened. Now, I know that that thought that was placed into my mind was placed there to get me to go and see my nans, because there was the opportunity to create this event. You know, there is no past and future, everything's preordained, and we're all susceptible to infiltration, and I know I was infiltrated on that day, and they got me a good one because, you know, as soon as my nan reaches out for me, I'm going to be there. You know, she's passed back to spirit now, but, you know, I loved her infinitely, unconditionally. So if my nan's reaching out, I'm going to go and see her, and, you know, regardless of what's happening. So they definitely got me a good one. Came out from this point here, it would have gone straight into the side of my car. It hit my car exactly here. This is exactly where it hit my car. Where the taxi ended up. It was facing this way. My car hit this lamppost here. Okay, the reason that I know my car hit this lamppost here my car went into this lamppost here. It didn't hit it from this side, it came directly into here. The reason that I know that happened is because there was a driver, a man, who was behind me in the car, travelling this way, behind my car. This man stopped to make sure that I was okay, and he explained to me after the accident what happened. And he said that the taxi just came out from the side, my car went in here, and it ended up back up the road over there. So the taxi hit my car from over there, and this is how my car ended up. It went into this lamppost here, it then span all the way up here. The car had spun. I woke up about here. My head had gone through the windscreen when it hit the lamppost, and I woke up here. We were spinning, we were spinning, we were spinning, and this is where the car ended up, back here. How did my car going at 30 miles an hour and that taxi coming out from where it came from, it must have been going God knows how much speed. But how did the trajectories work out for my car to end up here and for the taxi to end up exactly where the taxi had ended up, in that fence? I don't see how that is possible. For me, it seems impossible. Being here right now and looking at this scene, I can't understand it. I feel that the taxi driver must have... This is the centre of the road, and this is where the taxi would have supposedly come from, because there was cars on that side of the road and cars on this side, wall-to-wall cars. So the taxi's only spot was down the centre of this road. Now, if the taxi was coming down the centre of this road and it came out like this and boom, it's hit my car here and my car's travelling this way fast, how could my car come over here and end up hitting the lamppost here? Okay, I don't see how it was possible for my car to hit the lamppost here and the taxi to end up in here. How is that possible? What I feel happened is the taxi, it didn't come out from the road here, but reality was manipulated and the taxi came out from maybe here or maybe here, but reality shifted. Now if the taxi came out from here with me going at the speed that I was going at, I would have still had forward motion, so the taxi would have come out, boom, and then I could have been carried into the lamppost this way. I've hit the lamppost straight on, and then somehow the taxi, I don't know how, has come behind and ended up in the wall over there. It still seems quite bizarre, but that is where it ended up. So I'm not really sure what happened. The other option is there was some other force that was working at the same time as this taxi that just propelled the taxi in the most extraordinary way, and the taxi ended up in that streetlight sign. The taxi was here, boom, face on into here, as you can see from the photographs. I don't understand how that's possible. So I know that this was an attempt to kill me, to take me out at 8 o'clock on an 8 day, because I came in at 3:05, which is an 8 on the 8th, and this is how these malevolent forces work. Everything's numerology. You look into anything that's going on in this world and you look at the dates and the numbers and they stack up and they mean certain things. But we're not going to go into numerology here and talk about all of these other things because it detracts from the story. There's no point right now. You can do your own research on this. So I've discovered all of this information. I know that there's this attempt on my life. I've found out about this project Oak Tree. I know that these beings have been kind of like taking me out of my space since I've been a little kid and doing things with my DNA. I've had this onslaught of attack from the dark side since, you know, I've discovered this information about myself. And, you know, all of my abilities are so prominent. This is something else that I want to share with you too. When I had another serious car accident at the start of my spiritual journey. There was a few events that led to my spiritual awakening because I was in the darkness, man. I was a criminal. You know, I didn't know about love and lights. So there was a couple of things that woke me up. One of them was a spirit in our house which got confirmed to me, the same looking spirit by two different people that didn't know each other, so I knew there was something to it. This led me to finding a teacher that took me on this journey of parallel realities and past life regression. I also had an encounter whilst I was researching 2012 and the end of the Mayan calendar. I was in a house with a couple of my mates and lots of other people too that had gone to this talk, and this guy is giving a talk, and I've asked him a question and I've pissed him off a little bit, and I changed something inside of him because his face just disappeared. He held my glance, his face disappeared, and it turned to a lizard. So I'm there face to face. This is my first kind of like encounter with a reptilian being in the physical. I wasn't seeing this with my mind's eye, this was a physical. This man with a lizard's head who looked like a human a few seconds before is stood there looking at me face to face. And at that time I didn't even know about reptilians, I didn't even know about other kinds of beings, but this thing was just there staring at me, looking through my soul. And like, on the inside I'm thinking, what the fuck's going on, man? This is crazy. On the outside I'm trying to look cool as a cucumber, as you do, and trying to, like, you know, just be the man and be in this situation and not be fazed by it. But that happened, and we had some repercussions from that, but that's another story. So that happened, and then I was in a car crash in Romania where I was asleep in a taxi, and the three ladies that were crossing the road, the taxi ran the first one over. She came through the windscreen, smashed him in the face, got flipped up over the car and died. Second lady had her ankles cut clean off. Third lady was physically okay. But when I got out of the car, I saw this lady's soul leave her body. And I feel that this incident really woke up my abilities, because Shortly after this is when there was the headache incident with my wife. We moved to New Zealand, and I had this kind of healing thing where I was seen in another hospital room from the other side of the world. And around this sort of time, straight after my accident, something else happened. It was when that Madeleine McCann went missing back in 2007 from Praia de la Luz in Portugal, and she came into my consciousness whilst I was in the gym one day, and I spoke to her, and I found out what happened. Anyway, I phoned up this person that had kind of become a guide in my life, and spoke to this person, and this person said, "You better come and see me." And I got in the car and drove up the motorway to see this person, and something was trying to make me crash my car into the central reservation. I had to drive for an hour and a half, really focusing with all my might to keep my car on the road, because something was trying to make me crash my own car. So when I got to where I was going to, we both went in and spoke to Maddie and found loads of information out. This is a whole other story, and I've tried to take this story to newspapers and magazines, but no one will publish it. And I've actually written a song about it, which I've recorded and produced with a friend of mine and another artist, which I'm going to release in the next few weeks also. So that's going to be coming out. So that's going to tell this story. But the fact of the matter is, we found out all this information. This person that I knew had helped the police from murder investigations, and the evidence that produced esoterically had been used to gather other evidence in the physical world and been used to prosecute people. Scotland Yard have got a psychic division. This person knew someone in Scotland Yard, so phoned them, and my client and I have found out that Maddie's in Algeria. And you know what Scotland Yard turned around to us and said? They said, "We know, we've tracked her there ourselves already." So yes, Scotland Yard have got a psychic division, but the point of this is, the reason I'm telling this part of the story, because all of these things happen in quick succession, and my remote viewing ability, and my ability to bilocate, to go into Maddie's environment and get all the information from market towns and lamp posts with street markings, and look out to sea and sea islands and get an exact location on the map, was spot on, because the psychic division in Scotland Yard, they'd had exactly the same information. So I knew that things were happening and things were unfolding in me, and I also knew that there was other beings that really didn't want me to go on this journey and discover all of this stuff. They tried to keep me away from it. They tried to keep it locked inside of me by fragmenting my own personality and me being a criminal and all this sort of stuff. All of these different reasons. So I know that this is really higgledy-piggledy, and this is backwards and forwards and blah 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 blah, but I just wanted to share this experience. It helps me get a little bit more clarity, or does it, man? It is, telling this story, I'm kind of thinking, there's still so much that I need to remember, but I know that there's lots of people out there in this world that will be going through, or will have gone through, or will be going to go through this kind of experience. And I want you to know that you're not alone, and there's nothing to fear in this situation. This situation is it's a part of this spiritual game. There is a spiritual war going on right now on this planet, and there is a heavier consciousness, a parasitic consciousness that wants to feed and is feeding off human fear, that wants to keep human beings in a fearful vibratory state so that we are a food source to them. They don't want us to live with love, and love is the key. So if you experience any of these beings, I don't want you to go into fear. I want you to love. That doesn't mean you've got to put up with shit, because sometimes you've got to have a little bit of a fight in fourth density in these other spaces. Sometimes you've got to fight in third density. And this brings me back to another point, actually, because when I was in the gym, I'd had this being tried to come into my back and put the fire through and through my arms and that sort of thing in the healing experience. Then I've had the sauna incident. Now, the next night when I went out for dinner with that lady, before that I was in the gym again. I'm doing a circuit. I've set a little circuit up. I'm using this bench, there's some weights. I'm doing burpees and weights and a non-stop circuit. And this big dude's come over. Massive guy, maybe 20 stone, on steroids, jacked out of his eyeballs. And he stood there looking at me. And, I can see him at my peripheral vision. And my adrenaline starts racing in my body. and I'm preparing myself for a tear-up. And I'm in my mind and my heart thinking, just stay cool, stay calm, don't bite the bait. This is what's going on inside of me. Anyway, I continue to do my circuit. I'm going for another 2 or 3 minutes, and as soon as I stop to pick up a weight, he tries to grab the bench and take it away from me. So I just grabbed it and pulled it back to where it was, and he stood up and he's looking at me again. Then he gets his mate to come over. His mate comes over, another steroid head, and they're both looking at me, staring at me. Then he gets this other fella who speaks English to come over. He translates, he says something to this fella. This fella translates to me and says he's working out in the gym and he wants this bench. So I've turned around to him and I've said, tell him there's another bench over there and that I'm using this and I'm going to continue using this. And I've just looked at him in the eyes and he's just kind of like grunted and walked off. Now, the next night when I'm in the gym, I'm working out on a tricep machine and he comes over and he stands next to me and he says to me in English, when the night before he didn't speak any English, he says, excuse me, how many more sets have you got left on there? And I said, I've got 2 more sets. He says, okay, thank you. I finished doing my 2 sets. He walks back over to the machine and he says, have you finished now? I said, yeah mate, it's all yours. He says, thank you very much. He smiles at me and I just fuck off and carry on with my gym routine. But what I'm trying to get at is that these beings can manipulate people. So they've used a big dude on steroids to come into my space to try and invoke fear into me, to get me to go into combat. Now the old Jerry would have just picked up a dumbbell and smashed it around the side of his face. But the new Jerry, who's been on this spiritual journey for the last 11, 12 years, doesn't do that kind of thing. You know, the new Jerry uses his heart and feels and tries to always, you know, work things out the best way possible. But that doesn't mean to say that if a combat situation comes up that you don't fight. Because sometimes you have to fight. And if he had, like, gone to punch me, yeah, I would have fought. I would have punched him in the face as hard as I could. That doesn't mean that I'm right or wrong. It just means that I would have been in the moment working with the reality that I was presented with. But I stayed in my heart. I stayed cool, and I stayed at peace, and it diffused the situation. And the next day, you know, he wasn't having that influence, and he was such a lovely guy. Such a cool dude. But at the other time, you could see his eyes were taking over. Now, this leads me on to another piece of information that I want to share with you. I mentioned earlier that my mum used to hit me with a wooden ruler. Now, about 8 months ago, I was in Turkey again, and my children went to stay with my mum, my adoptive mum. And the first night that they got there, they phoned me up and they told me that there's a bit of an issue. I've spoke to my mum on the phone, and my mum is not her normal self. You know, she reminded me of exactly what she was like when I was a kid. And I could hear her talking in a different tone. And I realised in that moment that she'd been infiltrated and taken over. And that when I was a kid too, she'd been infiltrated and taken over. And that's why she hit me with a wooden ruler and pulled my pants down. Because when I mention that to her now, she feels so terrible about it. But it wasn't really her doing that. And I know I'm going backwards and forwards again, but this is just how crazy this story is. It really is up and down and in and out and sort of backwards and forwards with the dates. But I realised that when my kids had gone to her house, something had come in and made her treat them exactly how she treated me when I was a kid, when she got taken over. And so anyway, a friend of mine went round to my mum's house, got them and took them off, and they stayed with her for the next week, and so I managed to get back to England. But yeah, so that happens. But I just wanted to share that, because this is what happens on this journey. These beings come in and infiltrate people's consciousness. So when people are doing certain things, they're not always themselves. Most people that commit murders, they're not themselves when they commit those murders. A lot of times people can't remember what happened during the murder. It's because they weren't themselves. I've been involved in loads of situations during my life, and afterwards I've thought, what happened? You know, that wasn't really me. acting in that situation. I've been in lots of dangerous situations having the earlier life that I did, and I know that I was infiltrated, by some really not very nice forces. And again, this leads me on to another little piece of this story that I'm going to share. And I'm going to share it now because I know this goes back to when I was on my kind of earlier part of my spiritual journey. I was doing a lot of this parallel reality and past life work. And I was journeying into this parallel reality where I was like a prison victim. And I was kind of chastised. And I wrote about this in Into the Light, the third book that I'd written. And I was like in shackles and like buckled up on the floor in this prison cell. I've seen myself in this reality, and my body started to contort in the physical. Now I'm seeing all of this whilst my eyes are open, and I'm looking at this person who is my spiritual teacher opposite me, who was guiding me through this process, and mist has descended on the room, and this guy has walked through the wall into the room carrying a briefcase. His hair's swept to the side. He may be 33, 34, 35 years old, clean shaven, wearing a suit. He looks at me and he says, "Jerry, if you make this decision, don't ever ask for our help again." And what I was trying to do is strip away these layers of darkness and move from this lower vibratory space into a higher vibratory space. Strip away these layers of darkness, get rid of this criminal world, and move back into a space where I loved and lived with compassion. And I'd done so much work, and this was kind of one of the last straws. And he's looking at me. I'm not looking at him straight because I couldn't. I'm like this. And then I pushed my head. It was like I had to force my head through metal to look up towards him. And he's asked me again. He said, "Jerry, are you sure you want to make this decision?" And I've looked at him and I've said yes. He says, "Okay, fair enough." He's turned around, he's walked back through the wall, out of the room, and all the mist has descended in the room. And the person that was opposite me has said, "Well done, that was amazing." And I was smashed to bits. I was like so tired. It took so much energy out of me going through that process. Anyway, I'd sort of started to merge out of my criminal ways during this time. I was still doing a little bit of like fraudulent activity, but the hardcore stuff was kind of like had really fallen by the wayside. And it was just before we moved into New Zealand. And at the time I was working on a really big deal. And me and my pals would have got about £50 million out of it. And suddenly it all fell apart at the seams. And this deal was about to go through, and it just fell apart like inexplicably. And it wasn't until I got to New Zealand and I'm driving along in my car one day, just daydreaming, and boom, I get this knowing. The reason the deal fell apart is because I severed my ties with the darker forces during this experience. This guy came into the room and did a deal with me, and I'd gone on this journey of light. And it wasn't until a couple of years later, a year later, whenever it was, I'm driving along in the car and I get this knowing. Of course that's why the deal fell apart, because I told them I didn't want their help. There's my part of me that's saying, fuck, maybe you should have just asked for their help for a little bit longer until you got that money through, and then fucked them off. But anyway, that's just my ego. I'm so glad that happened and I wasn't tainted with the energy of all of that money, and that I've gone on my path of light and made money in different ways. So anyway, that's just another element to this story that I wanted to share. So there's this big concoction, this big jigsaw puzzle of information that I've just shared with you, but hopefully that you can get the picture. Okay, there was a project called Project Oak Tree. Certain women that carried certain bloodlines and DNA had boys that were born between 1973 and 1978 that had stargates as wombs, 11s in their birth charts, in their birth dates, numerologically, and they were stargates to bring through these certain souls, and the darker forces have been tracking them ever since and trying to find them. And I'm not saying I am one of these souls, but everything that has happened in my life points to me being one of those souls. Why would they try and take me out? if they did manage to take me out that day, they would have sucked my soul back up through certain technology they've got and probably used it for their own, you know, not so very nice purposes, because they've got this technology to harvest souls and do what they want with them. So obviously, for whatever reason, I got out of that car crash unscathed. I mean, my skull was cracked and it was pinching a nerve and all of this sort of stuff, but I healed all of that myself. And that's a whole other story, but if you want to read about that in full, you can just get Star Magic Heal the Universe and hear that full story. But they tried to take me out. The accident wasn't as it seems. There's no way, it's impossible for that car to come in on the sides. It's impossible for my car to end up where it did and for the taxi to end up where it did unless it came through the wall at another specific angle to try and take me out. There was the information about my mum's birth when she had me, the trauma that they infused into her with the cutting of the episiotomy, the taking me away from her, no contact, leaving her in a room for 13 odd hours, you know, all of this stuff, you know. And 13's another number, you know, which is important because there's 13 months in our zodiac, not 12, and they took Ophiuchus away and took the extra days and put them onto other months, and that's why there's some months with more and less, but really there should be the equal amount of 28 days across the 13 months. But that links to the human nervous system, which is a whole other story, but 13 is in Masonry, the Masonic faction everywhere, and if you look at the dollar bills and layers of the pyramids and all this sort of, you'll see that 13 is everywhere, but they try and keep number 13 away from us, you know, unlucky 13, Friday the 13th, all of this fucking bullshit. Really, 13 is powerful and we need to tune into it, but again, you need to do your own research on this. So there's all of this information that I've shared with you. I don't know what you want to do with this. I'm just sharing it, you know, you don't have to do anything with it. I'm just sharing it, and hopefully you're going to get something from this, and maybe you know something from hearing my story and you can share it in the comments underneath this video and help me piece more of my own journey together, because I would love a little bit more insight into this journey and, you know, what is actually going on here, because I'm only scratching the surface levels here. I know that, you know. I have lots of encounters with extraterrestrials, some malevolent, some benevolent, and I know that there is so much else beyond this illusory veil, and that we call this 3D matrix, and I'm just on a mission to uncover it all and to share what I know with you guys, so you can uncover and go on your journey and get the bits of information that resonate with you. And remember also, this is my experience. I'm not expecting you to believe a single word that comes out of my mouth, because this might seem like a complete load of bullshit to you. And if it is, that's cool, you know. I'm sharing it anyway, because this is my experience and my journey. And my experience and my journey doesn't have to be your belief system. It doesn't have to be your reality, but it's mine. But hopefully, in some way, shape or form, it can elevate you, ignite you, and help you look in some specific direction that's going to help you on your own personal cosmic journey to unravel the mystery of life. So, I can't think of anything else right now that I need to share about this story. I love you. If you're still watching after however long this is, I don't know, it's been like an hour and 20 odd minutes that I've been kind of like sat here talking to you. I love you so much. This is a bit of a brain baffler for me, and I'm still getting my head around it, but I'm sharing it now anyway. Hopefully, as I'm sharing it with you, I'm getting more insight and clarity. But this will filter through over the next few days, I'm sure. And, you know, thank you for listening. Thank you for, you know, in advance, if you're going to share any comments under this video to help me, you know, piece this jigsaw puzzle together. And hopefully it enlightens you in some way, shape or form, or expands your consciousness and brings all of us as a human species closer together. And remember, you got two choices. You got love or fear. It's love or fear. What are you going to choose, baby? Love is the only way. It's the key. Ultimately, unconditional love is the force, the cosmic vibration that runs through this spiritual fabric that we call the universe. It's what we are, and we must love unconditionally. With every fibre, with every particle, with every molecule of our own spiritual, natural, inherent nature. I love you so much, my friends. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Please share these videos with your friends, with your family, with your loved ones. Together we really can make this world a much more harmonious place. Teamwork is the key. You are the power. I am the power. We're all individual powerful beings, but when we come together and we unite through unconditional love, we're a major force, and nothing can disrupt us. Nothing can derail our trains. We are super, super powerful. I love you. I'll see you again very, very soon. Thank you so much. One love, my friends.